My name is Janelle Richardson. I'm 38 years old, and 6 months after my husband passed away, I started a new job that required me to work late-night shifts downtown. Every night, the same rideshare driver took me home. His name was Vincent, and I always made sure to tip him generously. But one night, everything shifted. Instead of turning onto my street, Vincent kept driving straight. Then he said something that made my heart freeze. "Your neighbor has been watching you. Don't go home tonight. Tomorrow I'll show you the proof." I'm telling my story on Justice After Dark because what happened to me could happen to anyone. If sharing what I went through helps even one person stay safe, then reliving this nightmare is worth it. I need people, especially women, to understand how danger can sometimes exist just steps away from their own front door. Let me go back to where everything truly began, when my life shattered. When my husband David died, I lost more than a partner. I lost my closest friend, my future, my entire sense of stability. He was only 41 years old. The heart attack came without warning on an ordinary Tuesday morning. He kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, and left for work, never to return. The doctors said it was sudden and severe, that he likely felt no pain, that nothing could have been done. Their words offered no comfort. Nothing could fill the emptiness he left behind. We had been married for 14 years. We had plans, a future we talked about often, traveling after retirement, possibly adopting a child, dreams that vanished in a single morning buried alongside him. Reality hit hard about 2 months after the funeral. David's life insurance helped, but it wasn't enough to support me long-term. I had been working part-time as a medical billing specialist, but I needed something more stable and better paying, even if it came at a cost. That's how I accepted a position as a night shift supervisor at a distribution center downtown. The pay was solid, better than any other option available to me, but the schedule was brutal. 10:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m., 5 nights a week. I'd come home completely drained, sleep through the day in a house that felt far too quiet without David, then repeat the cycle night after night. I no longer had a car. We had only owned one, and after David passed, his sister needed it more than I did. She had 3 children, and her own vehicle had finally stopped working. I sold it to her at a low price and began relying on rideshare services to get to and from work. That's when Vincent entered my life. The first night he picked me up, I was barely functioning. It was my 3rd shift, and exhaustion had taken over completely. I climbed into his car, a spotless, well-kept Toyota Camry, and sank into the back seat. He greeted me calmly, confirmed my address, and drove. He didn't force conversation, didn't play loud music, didn't do anything that made the ride uncomfortable. He simply drove smoothly and carefully, making sure I got home safely. When we reached my house, a modest 2-bedroom home in a quiet suburban neighborhood that David and I once shared, I tipped Vincent extra, $20 on top of the fare. At the time, I had no idea how important that ride, and that man, would become. He looked a little taken aback, thanked me sincerely, and wished me a pleasant night. The following evening, after my shift ended, I requested another ride, and once again it was Vincent. Everything was the same polite professionalism, the same calm, steady driving, the same quiet atmosphere that I desperately needed after spending 8 hours supervising a chaotic warehouse floor. I tipped him generously again. By the end of that first week, it became routine. Vincent picked me up every morning at 6:05 a.m., right as my shift ended. The drive usually took around 25 minutes, depending on traffic. Sometimes we talked, nothing deep, just casual conversation. He told me he'd been driving rideshare for 3 years and preferred early mornings because the roads were less crowded and passengers tended to be kinder. He was in his mid-40s with a warm expression and an easy presence. Something about him reminded me of David, not in appearance, but in the way he carried himself. Calm, respectful, safe. I tipped him well every time. $15, $20, every single ride. It was worth it for the reliability, for knowing someone I trusted was taking me home when I was exhausted and vulnerable. Vincent never pried into my personal life, but about 3 weeks into our routine, I mentioned that my husband had died. I'm not sure why I said it. Maybe I was tired of pretending I was fine. Maybe the grief had been building up, and I needed someone, anyone, to acknowledge it. He told me he was sorry. Then he shared that his wife had passed away 7 years earlier from cancer, and that he understood that specific kind of loneliness. We didn't linger on it. His car didn't become a place for emotional unloading. But after that, there was a quiet understanding between us, a shared respect shaped by loss. My neighborhood had always felt secure. Tree-lined streets, well-kept homes, neighbors who waved as they passed and took pride in their yards. David and I had moved there 8 years earlier because it was peaceful, affordable, and felt like the kind of place where a future could grow. After he died, the house became both my refuge and my cage. It held memories that were painful to face, but it was also the last place where I'd truly been happy. I saw my neighbors from time to time. Mrs. Chen, 2 houses down, occasionally brought me casseroles, bless her. The Henderson family across the street had 3 small children who played outside almost daily. And then there was the man directly across from me. His name was Gerald Pittman. Mid-40s, average build, thinning hair, a face you'd forget moments after seeing it. He lived alone in a house that always looked slightly worse than the others, not rundown, just neglected. Bushes that needed trimming, paint that had faded over time. I'd interacted with him only a few times over the years. Once, about 2 years earlier, he waved hello. Another time, after a storm damaged our fence, he offered to help David fix it. David declined politely. About 6 months before David passed, Gerald asked if we needed help with yard work. We thanked him and said no. After David's funeral, Gerald came by with flowers and a sympathy card. He said he was sorry for my loss and told me that if I needed anything at all, I should reach out. He appeared genuine. I thanked him and closed the door. A few weeks later, he knocked again, asked if I needed help around the house, mentioned that he'd noticed my gutters looked clogged. I told him I was fine, that everything was taken care of. He smiled, told me the offer was always there, and walked away. I didn't give it a second thought. At the time, I saw him as just a neighbor, maybe a little too eager to help, but harmless. I assumed he was simply the kind of person who liked feeling useful. Now, knowing what I know, those moments make my skin crawl. Every interaction was him testing boundaries, measuring how close he could get, positioning himself as the friendly, dependable neighbor so I'd lower my defenses. But back then, I didn't see it. I was just a widow trying to make it through each day without falling apart. Life settled into a pattern. Work, Vincent, home, sleep, repeat. Weeks passed, then months. I wasn't thriving, but I was managing. The job kept me busy enough that grief couldn't completely swallow me. Vincent's steady presence every morning gave me something consistent to rely on. And my house, though filled with memories that hurt, was still my home. I didn't notice anything unusual. That's what haunts me now. For weeks, maybe even months, I didn't notice a single red flag. I didn't register that small things in my house seemed slightly off. A drawer I was sure I'd shut left open just a bit. A picture frame sitting at a slightly different angle. I blamed exhaustion. I blamed grief. I blamed my foggy mind and my inability to focus while barely holding myself together. I didn't notice that Gerald always seemed to be outside when I got home in the mornings. Always busy with something, yard work, checking the mailbox, taking out trash, at 6:30 a.m. every day. I assumed he was just an early riser. I didn't notice that his waves were a little too eager, that he timed his driveway tasks to line up perfectly with my arrival, that his eyes followed me from the car all the way to my front door. I didn't notice any of it. But Vincent did. It was a Thursday morning, about 6 weeks into our routine. Vincent picked me up from work like usual. That night had been especially brutal. A massive shipment had come in, and I'd spent 8 hours dealing with non-stop logistical problems. I climbed into the car, thanked him, and immediately closed my eyes, ready for the calm 25-minute drive home. About 10 minutes into the ride, Vincent spoke. "Janelle, I need to talk to you about something." His voice was different, serious, tense. I opened my eyes and caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. His jaw was clenched, his face tight with concern. "Okay," I said, instantly alert. "What's wrong?" "Not here," he replied quietly. "When we get closer to your place, I'll explain, but I need you to trust me. What I'm about to do is for your safety." My heart started racing. "Vincent, you're scaring me. What's happening?" "Please," he said again, "just trust me." The rest of the drive felt endless, even though it was only 15 minutes. My thoughts were spiraling out of control. Was something wrong with my house? Did something happen in the neighborhood? Or was Vincent about to drop some horrible truth on me? When we turned onto my street, the same street I'd lived on for 8 years, where I'd built a life with David, where I'd always felt secure, Vincent didn't slow down. He didn't even hesitate. He drove straight past my house. "Vincent, what are you doing?" I blurted out. "That was my house." "I know," he replied calmly, but there was an edge in his voice. "Your neighbor has been watching you. You're not going home tonight. Tomorrow I'll show you the proof." It felt like all the air had been knocked out of my chest. "What?" I whispered. "What are you talking about? Which neighbor?" "The man who lives across from you," Vincent said. "Gerald." He took a sharp turn, driving farther away from my neighborhood. "I've been noticing strange things for the last 2 weeks," he continued. "And what I saw tonight confirmed everything. You're not safe there, Janelle. Not right now. Not until the police are involved." "This is insane," I snapped, panic creeping into my voice. "You're telling me my neighbor is watching me. How? Why? What proof?" "I'll show you everything tomorrow morning when it's daylight," he said. "But right now, I'm taking you somewhere safe. You're not going back to that house alone. Do you understand?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream at him, to turn the car around immediately. But something stopped me. The way his hands tightened around the steering wheel. The way his eyes kept flicking to the mirrors. He wasn't guessing. He was scared. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "There's a 24-hour diner about 15 minutes from here," he said. "We'll go there. I'll get you breakfast, explain everything I've seen, and then we'll decide what to do next. Together." "I should call the police right now," I said, reaching for my phone. "And tell them what?" Vincent asked gently. "That your rideshare driver thinks your neighbor is watching you. Without evidence, they won't act tonight. They'll tell you to file a report in the morning." "But I do have evidence," he added quietly. "Photos, videos, tomorrow morning we'll take it all to the police, together. For tonight, you just need to stay safe." We pulled into the parking lot of a diner called Rosie's, one of those old-school places with red vinyl booths and harsh fluorescent lights. Vincent parked and turned to face me. I saw it then, real fear in his eyes. "I know this sounds crazy," he said softly. "I know you might think I'm overreacting, or that I'm a creep myself. But I promise you, Janelle, I'm trying to protect you. Something is seriously wrong with your neighbor. I've been documenting it because I needed to be sure before terrifying you like this." My hands were trembling. "Show me," I said. "Show me what you have, right now." Vincent unlocked his phone and placed it in my hands. "I'm going inside to get us a booth," he said. "Look through the photos, take your time. When you're ready, come inside." He stepped out of the car and headed toward the diner, leaving me alone with his phone. My eyes dropped to the screen. The gallery was already open. My fingers shook as I swiped to the first image. It had been taken from Vincent's car. I could tell by the angle. My house. My street. Early morning light spilling across the pavement. Then I saw him. In the upstairs window of Gerald's house, directly across from mine, there was a figure. The next photo was zoomed in. Gerald stood at the window, perfectly positioned with a clear view straight into my living room. He was holding something. The next image zoomed in even further, and my stomach lurched. Binoculars, pointed directly at my house. I kept scrolling. The next photo had a date stamp, 5 days ago. Gerald was outside, standing at my mailbox. The image was slightly blurry, but unmistakable. He was going through my mail. 3 days ago. Gerald walking up to my front door while I was clearly not home. The house was dark. He was glancing around, checking if anyone was watching. 2 days ago. Gerald standing in his yard, but his body was angled toward my house. Something was in his hand. Vincent had zoomed in. A camera. A long lens. Bile rose in my throat. I kept scrolling. Photo after photo. Gerald watching from his window. Gerald in his yard with camera equipment. Gerald digging through my trash bins. Gerald standing at the edge of his property, staring up at my bedroom window. Then I saw the video. Timestamped from earlier that morning, just hours ago. The footage was taken from down the street. I watched as Gerald stepped out of his house, paused, and slowly looked around. Then he crossed the street. Toward my house. My house. He walked up to my front door. My heart slammed as I watched him pull something from his pocket. A key. My key. A key to my house. He unlocked the door and went inside. The video kept running. 4 minutes passed. Then he came back out, locked the door behind him, and calmly returned to his house. He had a key to my home. He had been inside my house. While I was at work, I dropped the phone onto the seat and flung the car door open, barely making it outside before vomiting onto the pavement. My entire body was shaking. Everything I believed, about my safety, my home, my life, collapsed all at once. When I finally managed to stand, I grabbed Vincent's phone and stumbled into the diner. He was sitting in a corner booth. 2 cups of coffee waited on the table. His face held nothing but concern and quiet sadness, like he already knew exactly what I'd seen and how shattered I felt. I slid into the booth across from him and pushed the phone back into his hands. He has a key to my house. Vincent nodded slowly. I know, he said. I saw him use the key twice, once this morning and once 3 days ago. How long? My voice cracked. How long have you known? I first noticed him watching you about 2 weeks ago, Vincent replied carefully. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe he was just an early riser who happened to be outside when we arrived, but something didn't feel right. So I started paying closer attention. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I asked. I wasn't angry, just desperate for answers. Because I needed to be sure, Vincent said. I needed proof. If I'd told you 2 weeks ago that I had a bad feeling about your neighbor, what would you have done? He was right. I would have brushed it off. I would have thought he was overreacting. When I saw him going through your mailbox, Vincent continued, that's when I knew something was seriously wrong. After that, I started coming to your street when I knew you were at work. I documented everything, the watching, the cameras, the trash digging. Then, 3 days ago, I saw him go into your house. My chest tightened. I started recording immediately, Vincent said. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and then this morning he did it again. I need to call the police right now, I said, grabbing my phone. Yes, Vincent agreed. But there's something else you need to hear first, and I need you to stay calm. How am I supposed to stay calm? I snapped. He's been in my house. He's been watching me. He has a key to my home. I know, Vincent said quietly. But Janelle, I think it's worse than that. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. This morning, when he went inside, I watched his shadow move through the windows. He went upstairs to your bedroom area and stayed there for several minutes. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I whispered. I think he may have placed something inside your house, Vincent said. Cameras, recording devices. I can't be certain, but the way he moved, the amount of time he spent up there, he wasn't just looking around. He was installing something, or checking something he'd already put there. The diner seemed to tilt around me. My bedroom. My most private space. Where I slept. Where I changed. Where I cried for my husband in my most vulnerable moments. I'm going to be sick again, I murmured. Vincent was already moving, steadying me and grabbing napkins. Breathe, he said gently. Just breathe. We're going to handle this. We'll call the police. We'll show them everything. They will take care of this. But you cannot go back to that house alone. Do you understand? You cannot go back until the police have searched it. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, tears streaming down my face. That's my home. That's the house I shared with David. It's all I have left of him, and that monster has violated it. I know, Vincent said softly. And I'm so sorry. But right now, your safety comes first. Do you have family nearby? Anyone you can stay with? I shook my head. David's family lives out of state. My parents passed away years ago. I have coworkers, but no one close enough to just show up and ask for help. Vincent was silent for a moment. Then he said, There's a hotel about 2 miles from here. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean, secure, and safe. I'm paying for a room for you tonight, Vincent said. First thing tomorrow morning, we're going straight to the police station and showing them everything. Okay, but I can't let you pay for a hotel, I said weakly, barely finding the energy to protest. Yes, you can, Vincent replied firmly. And you will. I have a daughter around your age. If this were happening to her, I'd hope someone would step up and protect her. So please let me do this. I was too drained, too shaken, too overwhelmed to argue anymore. I just nodded. Vincent drove me to the hotel. He walked inside with me, paid for 2 nights in cash, and escorted me up to the room to make sure everything was secure. Before leaving, he made me promise 3 things. That I wouldn't return home without him. That I'd call him first thing in the morning. And that if I needed anything at all, I'd reach out. I promised. Then I locked the hotel room door and completely collapsed. I cried until there was nothing left in me. I paced back and forth like a trapped animal. I kept staring at my phone, wanting to call the police immediately, but Vincent's words replayed in my head. What would I even say at midnight? That my rideshare driver believed my neighbor was watching me. Would they take that seriously? Instead, I pulled up Vincent's contact and began searching his name. I needed to know if I could trust him. If this was real, or if I was making a catastrophic mistake. I found his full name, Vincent Morrison. His rideshare profile, filled with hundreds of 5-star reviews. His business license. A spotless driving record. Everything checked out. He was exactly who he said he was. Then my thoughts shifted to Gerald. I scrolled through my own photos from past years, neighborhood gatherings, casual moments. And there he was, in the background of several pictures, always lingering on the edges, always watching. How had I never noticed? I searched him too. Gerald Pittman. Job at a downtown company. Divorced 8 years ago. No criminal history that I could find. Just normal. And that terrified me more than anything. He was ordinary, forgettable. If Vincent hadn't been paying attention, if he hadn't noticed, followed his instincts, and documented everything, I would have never known. Gerald would have continued entering my house, watching me, doing God knows what, and I would have lived completely unaware. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. I sat fully dressed on the hotel bed, lights blazing, jumping at every sound. My thoughts kept circling back to my house, to my bedroom, to Vincent's warning about possible cameras. How long had they been there? What had they captured? Had he watched me shower? Change clothes? Sleep. Had he watched me collapse in grief over my husband's death? The violation was too deep to fully process. My home, the one place that was supposed to be safe, had been breached. My privacy, my dignity, my sense of security, all stolen by someone I'd smiled at. Someone who'd brought me flowers after David's funeral. Morning finally arrived. I watched the sun rise through the hotel window and had never felt so relieved to see daylight. At 7 a.m., I called Vincent. He answered immediately. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I didn't sleep," I said. "I need to go to the police, now." "I'll be there in 20 minutes," Vincent replied. "We'll go together." True to his word, he arrived exactly 20 minutes later. We drove to the police station in silence. I couldn't put words to what I was feeling: terror, rage, violation, betrayal, all tangled together into something I'd never experienced before. At the station, we asked to speak with an officer about a stalking situation. We were taken into a small room. A detective named Maria Santos entered shortly after. She looked to be in her early 50s, with kind eyes and a calm but no-nonsense presence. She pulled out a notepad and looked at us. "Tell me what's going on," she said. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My throat tightened and my voice failed me. Vincent stepped in, explaining everything with calm precision. He handed Detective Santos his phone and showed her every photo and video. He walked her through the timeline, when he first noticed Gerald's behavior, how it gradually intensified, and finally the recordings of Gerald unlocking my front door and entering my home. With each piece of evidence, Detective Santos's expression grew more severe. When she watched the footage of Gerald using a key to access my house, she immediately called another officer into the room. "Miss Richardson," she said, turning toward me, "I need to be very clear with you. This is extremely serious." She paused before continuing. "What we're seeing here includes criminal stalking, voyeurism, unlawful entry, and possibly additional charges depending on what our investigation uncovers." She met my eyes. "I need to ask you some questions, and then we'll need to send officers to your home right away." "He may have put cameras in my house," I said, my voice trembling. "Vincent thinks there could be cameras in my bedroom and bathroom." Detective Santos's jaw tightened. "We're going to find out," she said firmly. "But you need to understand, you cannot return to that house until it has been fully cleared. This is now an active crime scene." She softened slightly. "Do you have a safe place to stay?" "She can remain at the hotel as long as necessary," Vincent said immediately. "I'll take care of it." Detective Santos glanced at him. "Are you family?" "No," Vincent replied. "I'm her rideshare driver. I noticed the behavior and documented everything." Detective Santos looked between us, and something in her expression shifted. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "you likely prevented Miss Richardson from being placed in very serious danger. Thank you for bringing this forward." She turned back to me. "Janelle, I want to be honest with you. Based on what we're seeing, I believe your neighbor had been planning something." She spoke carefully, deliberately. "The surveillance, the access to your home, the escalation, these are all indicators that often precede a violent assault. We need to act quickly." The words "violent assault" hit me like a physical blow. My body began shaking uncontrollably. "We're obtaining a warrant to search Gerald Pittman's residence," Detective Santos continued. "Given this evidence, that won't be difficult. We're also dispatching officers to your home to sweep for surveillance devices." She slid a notepad toward me. "In the meantime, I need you to write down everything you remember about your interactions with Mr. Pittman. Every conversation, every encounter, anything that felt strange then or makes sense now." The next few hours passed in a haze. I gave my statement. I wrote everything I could remember. Vincent gave his statement as well and turned over his phone after making backup copies. Detective Santos informed us that officers had already been sent to Gerald's house and that the warrant process was moving quickly. By early afternoon, she called me back into her office. Her face was solemn. "Janelle," she said, "we've completed the searches of both residences. I need to prepare you for what I'm about to tell you." My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst. "We found extensive surveillance equipment in Gerald Pittman's home," she said. "Multiple monitors, recording devices, external hard drives." She took a breath. "He had been monitoring you for approximately 4 months." 4 months. "We recovered footage dating back to mid-August," she continued, "roughly 2 weeks after your husband's funeral." 4 months. She went on, her voice measured. "We also located surveillance cameras installed inside your home." I watched her hesitate, choosing her words carefully. 3 cameras, 1 in your bedroom, 1 in your bathroom, 1 in your living room. All were recording continuously and transmitting directly to equipment in his house. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My bedroom. My bathroom. 4 months. "I'm so sorry," Detective Santos said quietly. "I know this is devastating, but there's more you need to hear." She folded her hands. "We discovered journals and documents indicating that Mr. Pittman had been planning to assault you." My vision blurred. "His writings suggest he was working up the courage to enter your home while you were inside. Based on the escalation we observed, we believe he was close." "How close?" Vincent asked, his voice tight with restrained fury. Detective Santos met his gaze. "Based on the journal entries, we believe it would have happened within the next week." A sound escaped me that didn't even feel human, somewhere between a sob and a scream. Vincent's hand settled on my shoulder, firm and grounding, keeping me from completely collapsing. "Gerald Pittman has been arrested," Detective Santos said calmly. "He's being held without bail." She continued, her voice steady. "He's been formally charged with stalking, burglary, voyeurism, and illegal surveillance. We're also pursuing additional charges based on what we uncovered." She met my eyes. "This is a very strong case, Janelle. He's going to prison for a long time." "I need to know," I said, forcing the words out through the tightness in my chest. "I need to know what he recorded, what he saw." Detective Santos's expression softened with pain. "Everything," she said quietly. "He recorded everything." She took a breath before continuing. "We recovered over 400 hours of footage from inside your home, your bedroom, your bathroom, your living spaces. Every recording is time-stamped and cataloged. It's now evidence, and it will be used to prosecute him." 400 hours. 400 hours of my most private moments. 400 hours of my grief. My vulnerability. My body. My life. All of it watched by a monster who lived across the street. "Did he share it?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "Did he post it anywhere? Send it to anyone?" "We don't believe so," Detective Santos replied. "At this time, all indications suggest the recordings were for his personal use only." She continued quickly. "We've seized all of his computers and electronic devices, and our forensic team is examining everything. If we find any evidence that he distributed the footage, we will file additional charges immediately." That should have brought relief. It didn't. Nothing about this felt relieving. "All cameras have been removed from your home," Detective Santos said. "We've also had a locksmith change every lock and install additional security measures. When you decide to return, the house will be secure." She paused. "But I want you to consider whether returning is what you truly want. I know that home holds deep meaning for you, but given the trauma tied to it now, many survivors choose to relocate." Relocate. Leave the house I shared with David. The house filled with our memories, our plans, our life together. Gerald had taken my sense of safety, and now he'd taken my home by violating it. "I want to see him," I said suddenly. I want to see Gerald. That's not a good idea, Detective Santos said immediately. I don't care, I replied. I want to look him in the eye. I want him to know that I survived, that he didn't break me. Janelle, Vincent said gently, you don't have to do this. Yes, I said firmly. I do. Detective Santos studied me for a long moment. He's currently being processed for arraignment, she said slowly. You can attend the arraignment tomorrow if you'd like, Detective Santos said. You'll be able to see him there, and if the judge allows it, you can give a victim impact statement. I'll be there, I said without hesitation. That night, back at the hotel, I finally unraveled. Vincent had gone home to get some rest, promising to pick me up in the morning and take me to the courthouse. For the first time since everything came to light, I was alone with the full weight of what had been done to me. I thought about all those nights I'd come home from work, drained and defenseless. All those mornings I'd showered and gotten dressed, believing I was completely alone. All those evenings I'd cried for David, shattered and exposed in my grief. Gerald had seen it all, recorded it all. And worse, he'd been planning more. Detective Santos had made that painfully clear. The journals they recovered described a man building himself toward something violent. He'd studied my routines, memorized my habits, waited patiently for the moment he believed was right. If Vincent hadn't noticed, if he hadn't cared enough to watch, to question, to document, if he hadn't driven past my house that morning and refused to let me go inside, I would have walked back into my home, unaware and alone. Eventually, Gerald would have used his key. He would have entered while I slept. He would have assaulted me in my own bed, in the house I once shared with my husband. Vincent had saved my life. A man I'd known for only 6 weeks. A man whose only responsibility had been to drive me from one place to another. He had no obligation to protect me, and yet he did. The arraignment the next morning felt unreal. The courtroom was small and cold. Vincent sat beside me in the gallery. Detective Santos was there as well, along with the prosecutor assigned to the case. Then they brought Gerald in. He wore an orange jumpsuit, his wrists cuffed. Somehow he looked smaller than I remembered. When his eyes met mine across the room, I expected guilt, fear, shame. There was nothing. Just a hollow, vacant stare that made my skin crawl. The judge read the charges aloud. First-degree stalking, burglary, voyeurism, illegal surveillance. The list felt endless. Gerald's public defender entered a not guilty plea, as expected. When the judge asked if anyone wished to speak, I stood. Your Honor, I said, my name is Janelle Richardson. I'm the victim in this case, and I'd like to make a statement. The judge nodded. Go ahead, Miss Richardson. I turned to face Gerald. My hands trembled, but my voice held steady. You watched me grieve my husband. You recorded me in my most private moments. You violated my home, my safety, and my dignity. You had a key to my house. You entered my bedroom and my bathroom, the places where I should have been safe. You treated me like an object, like my pain and vulnerability existed for your satisfaction. Gerald didn't react. He just stared back at me with those empty eyes. But you didn't break me, I continued, my voice gaining strength. You tried, but you failed. You failed because someone noticed. Someone cared enough to pay attention. Someone stepped in to protect me. And now, I said firmly, you're going to face the consequences of what you did. You're going to prison, Gerald. And I'm going to heal. I'm going to survive. And you're going to become nothing more than a warning, a story I tell to help other women protect themselves. I sat back down, my entire body trembling. Vincent reached for my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. The judge set bail at $500,000. Gerald couldn't post it. He would remain in custody until trial. As officers led him away, he turned and looked back at me one last time. For just a brief moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Not regret. Anger. Anger that he'd been exposed. Anger that his plans had been destroyed. The sight made me nauseous, but it also made one thing painfully clear. I had come terrifyingly close to something unspeakable. The months that followed were brutal. Trial preparation. Therapy appointments. Endless decisions about what to do with my house. Every day felt like dragging myself uphill, with weights pulling me backward. The prosecutor, Jennifer Walsh, was extraordinary. She constructed a case that left no room for doubt. The evidence was overwhelming. Vincent's photos and videos, the surveillance equipment, the recordings, and the journals where Gerald documented his plans and twisted fantasies. The defense tried to argue that Gerald was mentally ill, that he needed treatment instead of punishment. But the prosecution dismantled that claim. They showed how methodical he had been, how he researched surveillance gear, practiced lockpicking, carefully scheduled his entries into my home when he knew I wouldn't be there. This wasn't impulsive behavior. It was calculated, predatory, intentional. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I had to testify. I had to sit in that courtroom and listen as they described what Gerald recorded, what he wrote about me, what he planned to do. It re-traumatized me in ways I can't fully explain. But I did it. I took the stand. I looked at the jury and told them the truth. How he targeted me while I was grieving. How he violated every inch of my privacy. How he turned my home into a place of fear. Vincent testified as well. He explained how he noticed Gerald's behavior, how he documented it, and how he made the decision to intervene. The jury was visibly affected by his testimony. Here was a man with no obligation to help me, a man who could have simply dropped me off, collected his fare, and walked away, yet chose to protect a stranger instead. The defense tried to cast doubt on Vincent, suggesting his actions were suspicious or self-serving. It didn't work. His character was beyond reproach, and his evidence was undeniable. When portions of the surveillance footage were played in court, edited to remove the most invasive material, I had to step outside. I couldn't watch myself on those screens. Couldn't see myself through Gerald's eyes. Couldn't relive the moments of vulnerability he stole from me. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, I delivered my victim impact statement. I'd worked on it for weeks with my therapist, searching for words strong enough to capture what he'd done to me. Your Honor, I began, my voice shaking but steady. Gerald Pittman didn't just break into my home. He invaded my grief. He targeted me because I was vulnerable, because I had just lost my husband, because I was alone. He watched me in my most private moments. He recorded me in ways that stripped me of my dignity. He planned to assault me, to hurt me, to take even more from me than he already had. I paused, looking at Gerald sitting motionless at the defense table. I will carry the trauma of his actions for the rest of my life. I will never feel completely safe again. I was forced to sell my home, the house I shared with my husband, because he contaminated every room with his presence. I have nightmares. I have panic attacks. I check every room for cameras. I assume I'm being watched at all times now, I continued. That's what he took from me. I turned back toward the judge. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'm asking you to impose the maximum sentence allowed by law, not only for what he did to me, but to ensure he can never do this to anyone else. If he targeted me, if he was capable of what he did to me, then he will target someone else if given the opportunity. He is a predator, Your Honor. And predators do not change. The judge sentenced Gerald Pittman to 15 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 10 years. Upon release, he would be required to register as a sex offender, submit to GPS monitoring, and have no contact with me for the rest of his life. 15 years. It felt like both too much, and not nearly enough. Too much because it represented a massive portion of a human life. Not enough because no amount of time could erase what he'd done to me. But it was over. Finally, it was over. 6 months after the trial, I was finally beginning to feel like I could breathe again. I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. I couldn't step into that bedroom or bathroom without imagining the cameras, without feeling Gerald's presence lingering in every corner. A young couple with a baby bought the house. I hoped they'd fill it with joy and warmth, things I was no longer able to leave behind there. I moved into a small apartment across town. Ground floor. Security system. Cameras I installed myself, positioned only outside, so I always knew exactly what they were recording. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And it was safe. I kept my job at the distribution center. The routine helped, and my coworkers were incredible. They even raised money to help with my moving expenses. When they handed it to me, I broke down in tears. And then there was Vincent. Vincent became one of the most important people in my life. Through everything, a genuine friendship formed. He still drove me to and from work most days, though I made a conscious effort to use other drivers sometimes, working on not depending on any one person for my sense of safety. Vincent became like an older brother to me. We meet for coffee on his days off. He checked in regularly, making sure I was going to therapy, making sure I wasn't isolating myself, making sure I was okay. I even met his daughter a few times. She was wonderful, and it was easy to see why Vincent was so proud of her. I also began advocacy work. Detective Maria Santos connected me with an organization that supports victims of stalking. I started speaking at community centers and women's groups, talking about warning signs, personal safety, home security, and trusting your instincts. Sharing my story was painful, but I did it anyway, because I wanted other women to know they weren't alone. I wanted them to understand that predators like Gerald exist, that they often look ordinary, familiar, normal. Sometimes they live right across the street. Most importantly, I talked about the importance of people like Vincent, people who pay attention, people who step in, people who care enough to act even when they don't have to. People who choose to protect others simply because it's the right thing to do. I also started a small initiative to help women check their homes for hidden surveillance devices. Through my case, I learned far more about covert cameras and monitoring technology than I ever wanted to know, and I decided to use that knowledge for something constructive. I began offering free home safety checks for women who were worried. I showed them what to look for, how hidden cameras are often disguised, how to scan their spaces, and how to secure their homes properly. In an unexpected way, it was healing. It didn't erase what had been done to me, but it gave my trauma purpose. It allowed something awful to become something protective. Therapy helped too. My therapist, Dr. Patricia Moore, was patient and compassionate. She helped me peel back layers of trauma, not just from Gerald's violations, but from losing David as well. I'd never truly processed my husband's death. I'd been surviving one day at a time, barely holding myself together. Gerald had taken advantage of that raw vulnerability. Dr. Moore helped me understand that none of this was my fault. That being a grieving widow didn't make me responsible for a predator's actions. That I hadn't missed warning signs. Gerald had been intentional, calculated, and deceptive. She reminded me that I was allowed to trust people, allowed to live in my own home without fear, allowed to exist in the world without constantly scanning for danger. The healing was slow. Some days were easier than others. I still had nightmares. I still froze when I saw someone who resembled Gerald. I still avoided certain movies and shows that focused on surveillance or stalking. But I was healing, slowly, painfully, and honestly. 1 year after the night Vincent drove past my house and changed everything, we met for coffee at the same diner where he'd first shown me the evidence. Rosie's had become our place. A familiar spot where we'd meet, talk, and just exist as friends. "How are you really doing?" Vincent asked, studying my face with that same quiet concern. "Better," I answered truthfully. "Not perfect, not fully healed, but better. I'm sleeping more. The nightmares don't come as often, and most days I can take a shower without having a panic attack." "That is progress," Vincent said softly. "It is," I agreed. "And I owe so much of it to you. If you hadn't noticed, if you hadn't cared, if you hadn't documented everything and refused to let me go home that night." "Don't," Vincent interrupted gently, shaking his head. "Don't go there. We can't live in the what-ifs. We can only deal with what happened and what's happening now." "What happened," I said firmly, "is that you saved my life. The police confirmed it. Gerald's journals, his plans, he was days away from assaulting me when you stepped in. So yes, Vincent, you saved my life, and I'll be grateful for that for the rest of my life." His eyes filled with tears. "I just did what anyone would do," he said quietly. "No," I replied, shaking my head. "You didn't. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Most people wouldn't have taken the time to document it. Most people wouldn't have gotten involved. And you did. You're not just anyone, Vincent," I said quietly. "You're someone extraordinary, someone who cares about people he doesn't even know, someone who sees women as human beings worth protecting." We sat there in silence for a moment, both of us overwhelmed with emotion. "You know what all of this has taught me," I said finally. "That monsters exist in this world. People like Gerald, people who hunt vulnerability, who violate, harm, and destroy. But angels exist too," I continued. "People like you, people who step in, who protect, who care when they don't have to." "Maybe that's the balance," I said. "Maybe angels exist to stand in the way of monsters." "I'm no angel," Vincent said with a small, uncomfortable smile. "You are to me," I replied simply. Today, as I record this story, it has been 14 months since everything happened. Gerald is in prison, and he'll be there for a long time. I've built a new life in my small apartment. I still work at the distribution center. I continue my advocacy work. I attend therapy every week. And I'm okay. Not perfect. Not completely healed. But okay. There's something important I need everyone hearing this to understand. Stalkers exist. Predators exist. And they're rarely strangers lurking in the shadows. They're neighbors, coworkers, acquaintances. They're people who appear normal, people who blend in, people you'd never suspect. The warning signs are there, but they're subtle. Someone who's always around. Someone who shows unusual interest in your schedule. Someone whose offers of help feel intrusive instead of kind. Someone whose friendliness crosses a line you can't quite explain, but makes you uneasy. Trust that feeling. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And please, check your homes for hidden cameras. There are apps that can help detect camera lenses. There are professionals who can sweep your space. If anyone has had access to your home, and you have even the slightest reason to feel uneasy, check. It could spare you the violation I lived through. Look for unexplained holes in walls or ceilings. Inspect smoke detectors and electrical outlets. Be alert for tiny lenses hidden inside everyday objects. Pay attention to anything that seems unfamiliar or out of place. And never give unsupervised access to your home, not neighbors, not workers, not anyone, unless you trust them completely. Your safety matters. Even then, remain cautious. Install security systems. Place cameras around the exterior of your home. Change your locks regularly. Be aware of your environment. But above all, surround yourself with people who pay attention. People like Vincent, those who notice when something is off, who speak up even when it's uncomfortable, who step in to protect you when you can't protect yourself. And if you are someone like Vincent, and you see something that feels wrong, don't stay silent. Take action. Document what you observe. You could save someone's life. You could be the difference between a woman returning to danger or finding safety. Yes, there are monsters in this world. That's an undeniable fact. But there are also protectors. People who care. People who will fight for strangers. And that is what gives me hope. If you are watching this and going through something similar, reach out for help. Tell someone you trust. File a report with the authorities. Don't wait for the situation to escalate. Don't second-guess your feelings. Your instincts are valid, your fear is real, and you deserve to be safe. Check your homes, trust your gut, be vigilant. Never underestimate the danger that could be sitting right across the street. My name is Janelle Richardson. I'm 38 years old. I am a stalking survivor. I am here to tell you that healing is possible, that justice exists, and that there are good people in this world who will protect you when you need it most. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring. And please stay alert, stay safe. And please like, share, subscribe my channel. Justice After Dark.